Fantastic. So we're all set up here, guys, and I just want to start by saying thank you for coming out and checking out our 2019 market overview webinar. We have a ton of great information I'm going to be bringing to you guys today that's all relevant to the new year. A lot of basic Belize information that if you're just beginning your search with regards to Belize and Belize real estate, you might not know yet. And we're going to also dive into some kind of specific areas of Belize so you learn more about the country in general. My name is Will Mitchell. I've recently authored the book, The Investor's Guide to Belize Real Estate. That's a great tool that you guys can check out. It's available on Amazon, where essentially I interviewed every single one of my team members, whether it be bankers, lawyers, architects, and I got all of the relevant information with regards to investing in Belize real estate from them. All the profits from that book are going to be donated to underfunded schools in Belize, so I really hope you guys get that and check it out. It's a great resource. Aside from that, I'm personally invested in numerous properties in the market. I've done some developing, residential, commercial, so I'm invested in all areas of Belize real estate. And I've also had the opportunity to help hundreds of clients find their perfect investment property. So without further ado, I want to kind of dive into the information here. And I always love to start my webinars with just some general Belize photos here for you guys to take a look at, just to kind of set the setting and the tone of why we love Belize. It's the natural beauty that is the major draw to Belize. It's just such an amazing place. On the top left there, you can see the Great Belize Blue Hole. One of my favorite places to go diving. All of the beaches where you can just hang out and relax. The sunsets, everything about the country is just so beautiful, and it's why I love it so much. But just some general Belize facts to kick things off for you guys. As many of you listening to this webinar already know, Belize is an English-speaking country, and it's important for reasons beyond the fact that when you come down to Belize, you can communicate with the people. If you have, some sort of medical need in Belize, you can communicate with doctors. If you're looking to communicate with lawyers and do paperwork down here, you can obviously read and understand that in your native language. But the other thing is that it's based on British common law. As many of you know, Belize is a British Commonwealth country. The legal system is very similar to what you're used to in the US, Canada, Great Britain, because initially it was a British country. So it's very important to note that. And when you contrast or compare that to other countries in the region, like Mexico, Guatemala, or Costa Rica, those legal systems are based on Napoleonic civil law, where it's a two-tier ownership structure, where locals and foreigners do not have the same ownership rights. And it's possible to own properties in those countries, but you have to kind of find loopholes and ways to do it, and everything's good until something goes wrong, and then it's very tough to navigate those situations. Whereas in Belize, it's full foreign ownership, fee simple title, and there's no kind of loopholes that you have to jump through. You can have your name on the physical title of the property, and for me, that's one of the most important things and one of the key reasons why I look at Belize. Belize borders Mexico to the north, Guatemala to the west and south, with the Caribbean Ocean on the east. And as far as population goes, it's a fairly small country. The population is just under 400,000 people. So there's a lot of room for development and growth within the country still. And it's a very favorable tax environment. So there's no estate tax, there's no capital gains tax. Property taxes are extremely low when you're comparing or contrasting them to what you're used to in Canada or the US. Just to give you guys an example, if you were to look at a piece of raw land, say a 50 by 75 foot, kind of your average parcel of land, you'd be looking at about $75 per year. If you were looking at just kind of an average condo, you'd be looking at about $300 per year. So property taxes are very low compared to what you're used to. Can I live in Belize as an expat? And that depends on the amount of time you're looking to spend in Belize. So when you first enter the country, they take your passport and they stamp that. And when they do that, they issue you a 1 month long tourist visa. Now this tourist visa can be renewed on a monthly basis. It costs about $20. It's very simple. You go into the immigration office, they stamp your passport and issue you another 30 days. And this can be done essentially in perpetuity for as long as you'd like. So you don't need to go through any of these programs or apply for any of these things. If you want, you can stay in Belize as long as you like on this type of visa. After 1 year of being within the country, you can apply for residency, and after 3 years, you can apply for citizenship. And obviously, there's ways you can get these things expedited with work permits and other things. But generally, what most people like to do, and is usually the best way to go about it, is just to enter on that tourist visa unless you're looking to be spending a significant amount of time in Belize. If you're looking to invest in real estate or own real estate, you don't have to be a Belizean citizenship. And in that aspect, there really is no advantage. So it's very important to kind of note these simple things here. Taxes in Belize. People always ask me, should I declare a non-resident in my country? What should I do with regards to this? Depending on the country you're from, it could be advantageous to declare non-resident. I would never recommend relinquishing the passport of your home country because that's not necessary in any case. But in some cases it can be beneficial to declare a non-resident, and I'm happy to speak to you one-on-one about that, the specific case-to-case basis. But a very important stat that not many people are aware of is the fact that Belize has dedicated roughly 46% of its territory to national park and marine reserve. Why is this important? Well, on those first slides we saw the beauty of Belize, the reef, the ecosystems, the diving, the jungle. It's the reason why so many tourists and so many people are looking to Belize as a place to go visit or move to or relocate to. The secondary reason, though, that many people don't talk about is the fact that it creates a limit in the supply of available and developable real estate. And as the market continues to grow, as the economy continues to grow, and as more people come into Belize, what we see is real estate values appreciate because we've limited supply while demand is increasing. And it's a very important factor for us to take into account here. This is an interesting slide. Now, what you guys are looking at here is Wendy's, McDonald's, and Taco Bell, at least the Belizean version of it, because to this point, we do not have a single franchise fast food restaurant in Belize. And I want to just let that sink in for you guys. There's no McDonald's, there's none of these. And it's not because they're not allowed. It's just because that's where we are in the scheme of time. And I like to show this slide just to give people an idea of where we are in the scheme of time, because oftentimes people ask me, have I missed my opportunity to invest in Belize real estate? And to them, I generally will point out factors like this, because just imagine for a second being able to go back to a major tourism destination like Maui and invest in that, excuse me, and invest in that market before these franchise fast food restaurants had entered the market. And I'm not here to, encourage these to come in or say they shouldn't. I'm not on either side. I just like to point this out to show people exactly where we are in the scheme of time. This is just some kind of general Belize photos to give you an idea of the feel and the vibe of Belize if you haven't yet been down and visited. This photo taken on the right was actually taken just off our dock. There is a Goliath grouper in that kid's hands that was caught. Just an amazing thing. I live on the island of Ambergris Key. We'll talk about it a little bit more further on as we get into the webinar, but it's a very kind of mellow, slow vibe. Everyone drives golf carts. There's a very long point of the island that actually is fairly underdeveloped right now, so there's lots of room for growth on the island, but we're going to get into more of that later as we go on. One of the key things we look at when we're assessing a market that is highly based on tourism, like our economy in Belize, are the tourism stats from a real estate perspective. And the reason for this is that they're directly correlated. When we see an increase in tourism, and you can see our little graph right here, we generally see a proportionate increase in tourists who are going to invest in the market. Some people come down, they say, I kind of like it here. Maybe I'll get a second home, a vacation home, a property that they're going to come down and visit for some point of the year, and the rest of the year they're going to rent out. But a certain percentage of those tourists are going to choose to invest. So when we track the tourism data, we can analyze and see exactly what's going to be happening within the real estate market. This is one of the key things because this data is actually tracked by the Belize government, so it's extremely accurate and to the point. And what has the data been over the past few years? Well, for the past few years, in 2015, we had 341,161 visitors. From 2015 to 2016, we saw a 13.02% increase in tourism, followed by a 10.75% increase from 2016 to 2017. The 2018 data is yet to be released, but I can tell you based on initial analysis, it's looking like it's going to be another significant increase. And this has made Belize one of the fastest growing markets within the entire Caribbean and Central America region, if not the fastest. And all of this data is pulled from the BTB's website. So you can see this little chart we have right here. It tracks the data on a year, annualized and monthly basis. I always like to tell people watching my webinars, trust but verify. So please go to the BTB's website, take a look at these documents. They're all public domain. You can go visit them and check the stats out for yourself. Also, we've kind of broken it down on a month-to-month basis here, just with more of a visual graph. So please feel free after the webinar to kind of take a look at this data and review it. But there's one thing we can do to take this tourism analysis one step further, and that's look to the airlines. And people are probably wondering, okay, why are the airlines important? I get it. We want to know how I get there from where I am. Are there direct flights, this and that? But there's actually some important things we can take from the airlines, because the airlines don't add or subtract flights on the basis of if we fly it, they will come. The airlines add or subtract flights using their own internal reservation system. So when we look to the airlines, we can basically see a year in advance and see what is going to be happening in the tourism market based on how many flights are being added. And I like to break this down to just two very simple equations for you guys so you can help to understand this. And this is why the airlines are important from an investment perspective. One, the first one is when we see an increase in flights, we see an increase in incoming passengers, which is an increase in demand for rentals. So if you're an investor looking for cash flow producing properties, this is very important because those tourists that are coming in are the ones that are going to be renting your units, so it's important to look at this data. The second is directly based to our tourism analysis. When we see an increase in flights, we see an increase in tourism, and we see an appreciation of real estate values. So this data is very, very important to us. We keep a very close eye on it, and I want to kind of break down some of the past few years' data for you guys, and so you can understand where the flights are coming from. So we've actually broken down and listed here all the direct flights that go to Belize, all the different airlines. Again, after the webinar is done, you can come back to this and pause it and take a look. But basically, we're going to break down over the past few years what's happened within the market. In 2016, we had a major announcement for our Canadian travelers, and that was the first ever direct flight coming to Belize from Toronto, and they did 2 flights per week. What does that equate to? Well, that equates to an additional 286 passenger seats coming into Belize per week. And how do we know that it's 286? Well, a Boeing 737, which is the standard kind of plane these airlines fly, can carry 143 passenger seats. So I'm not saying these flights are 100% full, but when they add these flights in, generally they're flying them about 90%. Anyone who has flown with that WestJet flight from Toronto can testify and verify that they are flying these flights extremely full. So this is a great indicator for us to see what's happening in the market. But that announcement got outshined by a major announcement from the US market, which was Southwest announcing daily direct flights from Houston Hobby International as well as Fort Lauderdale. That was 2 major destinations adding in flights 7 days a week. It equated to an additional 2,002 passenger seats per week. And there's something that is not really mentioned when Southwest comes into a market. There's a phenomenon called the Southwest effect. And when Southwest enters a market, what this effect is you see an immediate jump in tourism because Southwest travelers are just so loyal. And they really don't deviate much from flying with Southwest, and we saw that right away when Southwest came in. We saw an immediate boom in tourism on the island and throughout the country, really. In 2017, WestJet said, you know what, that first flight kind of made sense. Let's try out a second market that's in more of the Midwest. So they added a direct flight from Calgary, 2 flights per week, and they decided to double their Toronto direct flights to another 2 flights per week. And Air Canada said, you know what, WestJet's making all the money here. Let's try to get it on this and add a test flight of 1 flight per week. So we saw another major shift in our Canadian market. 2018, well, in 2018, Aeromexico made the announcement that they were going to begin direct flights. That's 2 flights per week from Mexico City. Why is this important? Well, it's important because not only does it give Mexican travelers an easy access point to Belize, but it also gives European travelers a much easier route to go through as opposed to getting visas and traveling through the US and clearing US customs, which can be a rather complicated thing. So it opened up European travelers to travel to Belize with ease, and we're already seeing that on a major basis. But then Southwest came in as well, and they said they're going to do 2 direct flights from Denver. And again, WestJet increased their flights from Calgary for the months of January to April to 6 days per week. What's the total net change in flights based on just these 4 airlines? It's an additional 4,147 passenger seats per week. And like I said, we're not saying these flights are flying 100% full, but what we are saying is they're flying extremely full and almost completely full, and it gives us a very good indicator of what direction the tourism market is trending in, and that also helps us to dissect and assess what direction the real estate market is trending in. So these are very important stats for us. The next thing I want to take a look at is the baby boomers. And the baby boomers, just to give you an idea of how significant of a demographic shift they are the biggest demographic shift in human history. And the most important stat I want you to take a look at is this number right here, 11,765. That's the amount of baby boomers that are going to be retiring from the US alone every day for the next 10 years. That's almost 12,000 people retiring every day. And we're not saying that the entire 12,000 daily are looking to relocate, but 59% of baby boomers have already stated in the US that they plan to relocate. Now, a good portion of those baby boomers are planning to relocate to Florida and Phoenix, and we accept that as a given. But our question is, what about the other 28 million people who are planning to retire somewhere else? 3.3 million Americans have already decided they will retire abroad, and an additional 17 million are interested in doing so. And how are these baby boomers going to make their decision on relocating? Well, I'm guessing it's very similar to why a lot of you are listening to this webinar. They're going to make a list of viable options and traits and characteristics that they would want in a market to relocate to, and they're going to go down that list and find destinations that meet that list. And this is actually one of the reasons why Belize is already seeing such a significant disproportionate amount of baby boomers coming to Belize, and why we're expecting to see so many more do so in the future. So, it's going to be very similar to the list that a lot of expats made. Is it English speaking? Can I communicate with the people? Is it a nice warm climate? Is it a safe environment? What's the cost of living like? Is there a close proximity to home? Can I make direct flights and have my family come visit me, or can I go back for portions of the year? What are the recreational activities like? So Belize checks off so many of these boxes for baby boomers, and that's why we're currently seeing such a disproportionate amount of baby boomers retiring to this market. But that's not even the most important phenomenon that results from these baby boomers. The real thing that makes us, turn our eyes here is what happens when the baby boomers and tourism interact within the market, because the interaction of the two really is the most amazing phenomenon for real estate investors. And I've broken it down with just kind of a simple diagram for you guys here. When we see an increase in baby boomers relocating, we see a decrease in available nightly rental units. Now, how does this happen? Well, say we have a baby boomer couple relocating to Belize, and they're looking to buy a condo from someone like myself who would rent it out on a nightly basis year-round. When they come down and they buy that condo from me, that's one unit that is exiting the overall rental pool, which right now hovers around 2,000 units for the island of Ambergris Caye. So when they come down and they buy that unit, it is no longer available to rent, which is actually decreasing the supply of rental units in the market. The net effect of this is an increase in rental rates and an increase in occupancy rates. And as many of you know, if you're an investor and you own the property, these are great things that we want to see. I also want to touch on banking in Belize, because people often ask me, can I have a bank account in Belize? What's the process like? I am connected with several banks in Belize, actually. I'm happy to help you guys at least get the steps to learn what the process will be like and put you in touch with the right people. But just some general info on banking. So the currency is actually pegged in a 2-to-1 ratio to the US dollar. Everywhere in Belize accepts US dollars. So if you go want to pay for something with US, anyone will accept that, which makes it very easy to transition into the country. But what about mortgages, lending? Can I get a mortgage? What's financing like in Belize? And that's a really great question that people often ask me. And I want to just first break down the banking system a little bit for people. So in Belize, the bank reserve requirements are 24%. So if someone who is banking with the bank goes and deposits $1 into the system, the bank can only lend out 76 cents of that dollar. Now let's contrast that to the US or Canada, where we have fractional reserve systems. Essentially, a fractional reserve system means that if you deposit $1 into the banking system, the banks are now able to lend upwards of $10 out with essentially maintaining zero reserves. Now, what is the result of doing these kind of two separate systems? Well, in Belize, we have a very, very safe banking industry. In the history of the banking industry in Belize, there has never been a single banking failure, not one. But the downside of this is that we see more expensive lending. So interest rates are higher, down payments are higher. It's more difficult to come by financing than what you would be used to in the US, because money is essentially cheaper there. So there's a couple key takeaways from that are very important to note. And now I'm not saying that it's impossible to find financing on real estate deals in Belize. There's lots of ways, like seller financing. You can find people that are doing real estate syndications. In some cases, people do stage construction payments on new builds. There's lots of options there, but it's just important to kind of note this, because people always ask me about this financing. Next, I want to touch on the island of Ambergris Caye, and the reason that I focus in on Ambergris Caye is that Ambergris Caye is the #1 destination for retirees, for expats. It's the #1 destination for tourism with Belize, receiving over 70% of the overnight tourism arrivals. It's the largest island in Belize. It's 24 miles long and 3 miles wide at its widest, 12 miles from the mainland. The population varies from anywhere from 25,000 to 35,000, depending on which season we're in. And again, people often ask me, Is it too late to invest in Belize? Is the market overbuilt? And I like to contrast this to two comparable islands in the region. That's Roatan, Honduras, and Grand Cayman in the Cayman Islands. The population of those two islands is respectively about 55,000 people each. So when you assess this market and see if there's room for growth, absolutely there's room for growth. And we're not even near any of the kind of comparable islands within the region. Some awards and accolades, because it's one thing for me to just tell you guys about the natural beauty of Ambergris Caye, but it's important to see kind of third-party credibility. So Islands Magazine has consistently rated it the #1 island to retire to. It's been rated by TripAdvisor reviewers around the world the #1 island in 2013, 2014. It's also been a top 10 destination consistently, and those reviews are important because those aren't done by some panel at TripAdvisor. Those are done by millions of reviewers around the world who have traveled to these destinations and have said, this is a top 10 destination. This is a #1 island. So they're very important to us. It also was a winner at the 2018 World Travel Awards in International Living Magazine, and CNBC recently rated it the #1 island to retire to based on affordability, accessibility, and beauty, which is obviously a massive thing to receive. The development of the island is very interesting because it started out as a sleepy fishing village. There was never a plan that this island would receive so much tourism as opposed to other areas in the region. They just said, you know what, we want to get out to the reef, which you can see along here in the morning, go cast our lines and bring our fish back, and that was the mentality. So just to give you guys a little bit of perspective here, going out to the reef, the water depth is about 6 to 8 feet deep. When you get up behind the reef, it's some of the deepest waters in the Caribbean at about 1,000 to 3,000 feet. And the island, like I said, didn't have a master plan. This is the east coast of the island. One phenomenon that we see here, generally in tourism-related markets, the west coast is going to be highly developed. You can't really see the west coast of the island. It'd be down behind this area. But the west coast to this point has remained relatively undeveloped. Now, why is that? Well, obviously the reef is a huge factor, but up until recently there was no road access to even get to the west coast, and we're just now seeing an explosion of activity on the west coast, and it's arguably holding some of the biggest opportunities we've seen to date, and we'll actually look at a couple of those at the end of the webinar. But it's just very interesting to note that there was no master plan. The island just kind of developed as it did. So like I just mentioned, the first road that was ever put in to get to the west coast, you can see it somewhat over here in our little diagram, was done in 2010. That's when the east-west road connection was established, and some properties became available in this area. In 2012, that's when properties really became available and investment kind of began into the area. As kind of infrastructure grew, growing to that area, and people took notice of how beautiful the beaches were along this west coast, they started to realize the amazing potential of the west coast over here. And it actually was coined the name Secret Beach. When the name Secret Beach was coined was when we saw basically an explosion of activity on the west coast. Over the course of the past couple years, we've seen numerous commercial properties opening up. We've seen real estate values appreciating in the area significantly. We see a lot of development that's beginning to take place off the beach for the first time. So the area is really going through its kind of first major boom. And also it's important to note that DiCaprio has his private island just off the coast of the west coast over here. It's called Blackador Caye, and we're going to talk a little bit about that later on as we go here. One of the reasons why I'm personally investing in Secret Beach and why so many others are is because the growth is not happening by some marketing campaign that's basically making this happen. The growth has been 100% organic in the area. People have basically seen the natural beauty and they've bought into this, and they see how many tourists are visiting every day, and they really see the opportunity for this area to grow and become one of the more beautiful areas of Belize. So that's very important from a real estate investor perspective to know. Like I mentioned before, DiCaprio is developing on his island just off the west coast of Secret Beach. That's an island called Blackador Caye, and he's doing a $250 million eco-resort. Why is this important? Well, obviously it's important to see development taking place in the area, but it also carries a lot of weight when a guy like DiCaprio comes into this market and basically says he's going to be developing, because so many people, it draws so much attention to the area and is really on its own one of the factors that is driving values in the area. So it's a massive thing for us to see DiCaprio come in here. People often ask me what some opportunities are, so I like to break some down for you guys here just so you have an idea of what the market is. I'm not saying that these are definitely going to be of interest to you. If you're interested in something else, let me know. I'm happy to chat about anything, but I just like to give you guys some perspective. The first thing I want to point out is a beachfront villa called Rosewood Estate. It's listed at $2,700,000, and this is an 8-bedroom villa, beachfront, with 150 feet of beachfront, a pool, basically kind of the ultimate deluxe luxury villa. And this is actually currently being rented as a rental property. And just here's some photos to give you guys perspective. The property rents for $2,000 to $3,000 a night, and is currently in its first year of being rented, seeing an occupancy rate of around 50%, which is only expected to grow. Like as I mentioned, there's a private dock. It's one of the only properties in San Pedro town of this size, newly renovated. So this is a very interesting property from, having your own kind of king palace, but also having the factor to be able to rent it out and generate a significant amount of income. Second thing I want to identify are the lots at Mahogany Bay Village in South Village here. The lots are starting at $150,000. This is a newly developed gated community. There's a Hilton hotel in there. There's 20 commercial businesses. It's master plan. All the properties are canal front. You can have your own boat slips. You can, drive in from the Caribbean Ocean, boat in there, dock your boat in your boat slip, go into your place, go grab dinner just out the door. There's the #1 rated coffee shop in the island, the #1 rated restaurant in the island. It's all in there. So this is one of the top opportunities, and this is the first time these lots have been available to private investors or people looking to build an investment property of their own or their own home. So this is a major opportunity. Last thing I want to talk about is kind of people often ask me, what's the entry point property to this market? What's a property that I can secure just to kind of test out what it's like to own property in Belize, a little bit of money out of my pocket, and get involved in this market and get involved in an area that's growing where I'm going to see appreciation. And those are the lots in Palm Garden and Secret Beach. So they're just off the #1 area of growth within Belize, which is Secret Beach in this area. There's roughly about 15 lots remaining there. You can see these lots do have seller financing. So if you remember back to the banking area of this webinar, I mentioned that. The seller financing is starting at 10% down. The lots are listed at $27,000 they're starting at. So it's a very kind of low money out of pocket entry point property into this market. Here's some of the lot photos you guys can see. As I mentioned, the lots are starting at $27,000. Optional seller financing. They're in the path of progress. And one of the reasons why I'm personally investing in these is that you're not required to build. So there's no kind of, you need to build in a year, you need to build in 2 years. You can buy one of these lots and hold it for the meantime while the values are appreciating. If you decide you want to keep it for the future and develop on it, or if you decide you want to sell it, you are in full control of these. And if you do decide you want to build, that's great. I actually own a lot in this area. My lot is lot 5. So if you see here, this is my lot right here. And I've actually developed the eco home that some of you may have seen on my YouTube channel there. If you haven't seen, you can go to my YouTube channel, Will Mitchell Belize. Take a look at that eco house. That's located on lot 5 in here. There's several other investors who are currently about to begin development. So this is the #1 area in Secret Beach that is kind of taking off with a little money out of pocket lots. And yeah, if you guys are interested in chatting more about those, I'm happy to chat about them. If you're interested in chatting about anything else with regards to Belize, I'm more than happy to talk. Shoot me an email, shoot me a call. I'm happy to get in touch with you guys and tell you more, answer any of your questions. If you do want to secure one of these lots, shoot me an email, let me know which lot you're interested in, or if you want to see lot photos, we can talk about that too. And I want to just say, thank you guys for coming out and checking out this webinar today. And I hope to see you guys again in the near future and meet you down in Belize and down in paradise.